on? Okay. All right. Okay. Hey, everybody. My name is Dr. Cora Violet Dingleberry the 19th, and I am a COVID researcher. And today I'm here to make sure that all of you know all about the Rona. I'm sure you've been hearing about the famous Rona all year long. You might even be sick of it. But it's something that's affecting all of us, so it's really important for us to understand. So today, we are going to answer 5 big questions that a lot of students have about the Rona. What is it? Where did it come from? Why is it such a big deal? When will it be over? And how can we know more about it? So let's get started. The first big question to answer is simply, what is it? You've heard it called Rona, you've probably heard it called a lot of other nicknames, but you've definitely heard it called coronavirus or COVID-19. So what exactly does that mean? First of all, COVID-19, which is the real official name of the disease, is a respiratory illness. And respiratory means that it attacks the breathing system. So the respiratory system is everything that has to do with your lungs and all the stuff connected to it that allows you to breathe. So a respiratory illness gives you trouble in that area. So if you've heard about the symptoms of COVID, then you might have noticed that they have to do with breathing, a lot of them. So for example, coughing, sore throat, loss of taste and smell. You know how your nose and your mouth are connected, right? So losing your taste and smell. And then similar like to flu or cold symptoms, fever, nausea. When it's very severe, people might even have trouble breathing or very severe chest pain, or their lips or their face might even turn a little bit blue. And if someone has those symptoms, they should probably go to the emergency room. So you notice that all of those symptoms, or most of those symptoms, have to do with respiration, with breathing. So that's what COVID kind of does to people if they get it. One other thing that's important to know about what it is the fact that coronavirus and COVID-19 are actually not quite the same thing. We call it Rona and other things that have to do with the name coronavirus, but those are a little bit different. A coronavirus is actually a type of germ. Okay? A coronavirus is just a type of germ. And when a person gets a coronavirus germ, it can lead to a lot of different illnesses. In fact, the common cold, just a regular old cold, is one of the diseases that is caused by a coronavirus. So actually, there's a good chance that you've had a coronavirus in your body before. However, what's going on now is that we have something called the novel coronavirus. And the word novel means new. So it's a type of coronavirus that we've never seen before. And that's why it's causing us such a problem, because it's a new kind. So the novel coronavirus leads to what we all know as COVID-19. The famous COVID-19, or COVID for short. And if you take a close look at the name COVID-19, you can actually notice where it came from. It comes from coronavirus disease 2019. So you can see COVID-19. It's called coronavirus disease 2019 because it comes from a new coronavirus that was discovered in 2019. So when you hear people joke about the Rona or whatever else they might call it, they're really talking about COVID-19. So the germ is a coronavirus or the novel coronavirus. The actual sickness, when you get sick from it, is called COVID-19. Okay? So, the short answer to our first question of what is it is that it's COVID-19, which is a disease caused by the new coronavirus. Okay? Moving on to our second question, where did it come from? This is one of the biggest questions that I know everybody has. You've probably heard a lot of different possibilities. You've probably heard that it came from an animal. You've probably heard that it came from China. You've probably heard that it was man-made in a lab somewhere, whether in China or the US. So, the most likely answer is this one. That it began in an animal and then infected a human who came into contact with that animal. There's a lot of rumors about it being a bat. It might have been a bat. We don't know for sure. There's a lot of rumors that it was because people were eating the bat. They might have been eating the bat. Some cultures eat bats, but we don't know that for sure either. So scientists do know it probably came from an animal into a human, but the exact moment when and how that happened, we will probably never know. The second thing that people have heard is that it came from China. This is sort of true. Okay? It did start in a place called Wuhan, China. That was the first place where someone caught COVID-19. However, China didn't make it. So that's something we need to understand. Chinese people did not intentionally spread COVID-19 around the world. It just so happens that that's where it started. That is where an animal infected a human. And that has happened in other times and places around the world. This is not the first time that an animal has infected a human with a virus. That's actually not uncommon. Scientists even have a category for that type of virus that goes from animal to human. And it could happen in a lot of different places around the world. The last thing that a lot of people have heard is that it was man-made in a lab. This is highly unlikely. Scientific evidence shows that it was probably not man-made. It was very probably from an animal. Like I said, this is not the first time that a virus has been known to jump from an animal to a human, so that's not impossible. It's also not the first time that a global pandemic has occurred that affected people all over the world. So sometimes nature just does this. It's unfortunate and it sucks for us. But it doesn't mean that someone made it in a lab to be used as a weapon in China or the United States or anywhere else. So there's a lot of answers that we probably will never get about how it started, but the most likely scientific explanation is that it started with some animal and it mutated so that it was able to affect humans. Our third question is, why is it such a big deal? If it's a little bit similar to the flu and it's made from a type of virus that also causes colds, why did COVID suddenly take the world by storm in this way? What's different about it? So there's a few answers to that question. The first big answer to that question is that it is highly contagious. So, I'm sure you know that other things like the flu are contagious too, and colds, meaning you can spread them. But COVID, or the novel coronavirus germ, is more contagious than others. It spreads very easily. Other people can catch it very easily. So that's one of the major reasons. It's simply highly contagious, more so than other diseases. It jumps very quickly. The other reason, and this is a big one, is that the symptoms are slow. A person can catch the novel coronavirus germ from someone else, but not show any symptoms for 2 to 14 days. Or if they're a particularly young or healthy person, they might never show any symptoms at all. So what that means is that someone could be walking around for up to 2 weeks with the virus in their body and be spreading it around and have no idea because they don't feel sick. So that's the second big reason that COVID has become such a big deal, because people can be walking around spreading it without knowing. And that was happening at the beginning before we really understood what was going on. The last big reason is because it's new. which means there is no vaccine yet. Okay? It is a brand new disease. Like I said, it's called the novel or new coronavirus germ. So although scientists know about coronaviruses, the type, they've never seen this particular coronavirus in humans before, which means we don't have a vaccine for it. So we're just now figuring out how to treat it. So it's spreading very quickly. People can be spreading it without realizing it. And on top of that, we didn't have a vaccine yet. So that's why it was able to become such a big deal and take over the world in the way that it has, and differently than other illnesses. Our fourth big question is probably the number one question on everybody's minds. When will it end? When is it going to be over? Trust me, I want to know the same thing. So do all the scientists and doctors. The problem is that the short answer to this question is we don't know. And I know that's not what you want to hear, but unfortunately, that's the truth. Science is a slow process, and there are scientists like myself and medical professionals and medical companies and organizations all over the world that are working on vaccines and treatments right now. But it's going to take a while. What we really need is a widespread vaccine. And what I mean by widespread is that a lot of people have it. Let me tell you a little story that you might not know. You all know about the flu, right? Everyone knows about the flu. It's a pretty common thing that can make you real sick, but it's also easy to treat. So the flu actually used to be called Spanish influenza, flu for short, and it really took over the world as a global pandemic in 1918. So about 100 years ago, people were dealing with the exact same situation as us, but it was just the flu. But it was new, so they didn't know what to do with it yet. And it was contagious, and it spread all over the whole world really quickly. And the thing that has finally made the difference, the reason that the flu is not a global pandemic and now it's just a pretty easy disease for us to treat, is because of a vaccine. People get flu vaccines every year. Not every single person gets the flu vaccine, but enough people are now vaccinated from the flu that when it pops up, it doesn't go wild, and doctors can treat the person and heal them, and the flu doesn't become this global pandemic again. So eventually, that is what needs to happen with COVID-19. There needs to be a vaccine that a lot of people have, and when enough people have it that the spread starts to slow, then doctors will be able to catch and treat new cases so that they don't become huge outbreaks. So the answer is kind of, it will be over when enough people have the vaccine that the spread really slows down and it's no longer a pandemic. So hopefully in the end, COVID is probably not going to disappear. And I know that that isn't what you want to hear, but it's probably true. COVID's not going to disappear, but hopefully it will become something like the flu, where it still pops up sometimes, but we know how to deal with it, we can treat it, people no longer consistently die from it, and when someone gets it, it doesn't turn into a global outbreak. The last big question is, how can we know more? I'm sure that this video did not answer all your questions about COVID-19. It didn't answer all my questions about COVID-19. I'm a researcher. I always have more questions. But there are a few places that you can get reliable information about this disease. The first really good place I would say to go to is the CDC. The CDC is one of the most respected medical organizations in America. So they're always researching, and they've been putting out great, accurate information to the public about COVID ever since it started. So the CDC is a really good place to go. Another really helpful person that you can listen to is this guy, Dr. Anthony Fauci. You might have seen or heard of him on the news over the last year because he's the United States advisor about COVID. So he's the one who's been giving information and advice to the government about the best way to handle it. The government doesn't always listen to him, but he definitely knows what he's talking about. He has a lot of experience with other pandemics, such as HIV, and even other ones that were caused by coronaviruses, so they're kind of similar. So he's a great person to listen to. You can look him up and see what he has to say. The most important thing to know is that misinformation can be really dangerous. There is a lot of misinformation out there. You've probably seen all kinds of stuff about COVID on the internet and on social media, or even heard it from your friends and family. For example, people are saying that it came from 5G. That is false. That does not make any kind of scientific sense. People thought that if you ate a lot of garlic, you could get rid of it. That is also false. It just doesn't work that way. So, misinformation can be, at best, just kind of a waste of your time, but at worst, it can actually be dangerous. It can have you doing things that are going to harm you instead of help you. So, the best thing you can do is listen to medical professionals and medical organizations. You can ask your own doctor for advice, and you can also look for reliable sources like these places. So if you hear something about COVID from a friend or social media or whatever, fact check it. Look it up on something like the CDC and see if it really seems true. So let's recap what we know. We learned all about the Rona. Our first question was, what is it? We learned that the Rona is really COVID-19, the disease that comes from this novel coronavirus, and that it's a respiratory illness that affects people's breathing system, with symptoms kind of like the flu or a cold. The second question was, where did it come from? We learned that we will never know the exact answer to that, but the most logical, likely scientific explanation is that it started with an animal and then it affected a human who came into contact with that animal. The third question was, why is it such a big deal? How did it blow up into this global pandemic? We learned that the answer to that is because it's so contagious, because it takes a long time for symptoms to show, and because we don't have a vaccine yet because it's new. Our fourth question, our biggest one, was when will it be over? We learned that we don't know the exact answer to that question, but eventually a widespread vaccine is what will help us leave behind the pandemic stage of COVID and hopefully be able to treat it like a normal disease like the flu. And the last big question was, how can we know more? We learned that misinformation is dangerous, and the best thing you can do when you have questions about COVID is go look for a medical organization or a medical professional, such as the CDC. So, I hope that this video answered most of your questions about COVID-19, and I hope that you all stay safe and healthy. Dr. Cora Violet Dingleberry, the 19th, signing off.